I'll concede your point just for brevity. But
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since like what 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 300 and, my gosh, it's been a while. What number is this? 344 of the Buck Around. I am one half of the Buck Around, Richard Branch, joined, as always, by my, I am going to say, healthy colleague, Maxwell Brusky, because I am a slobbery mess. Max, how are you, sir?
Healthy, yeah, I like it. I feel like I'm one of the only people I know that hasn't been affected by cold and flu to this point.
Ugh.
And literally, like everybody I know, Henry I know missed a day or two, and he like made a point to tell me, like, I'm gonna go to class. I'm not gonna go to this class. If I feel better, I'll go. And then my wife too, man, she had a nasty cold last week. So I don't know.
Boy,
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
I know.
Better than most. Clearly.
Max, I think you're pickled with, I don't know,
Ooh,
something.
Could be. Secondary effects. I don't know.
Because
I'll take it.
Everybody in my house has given me something, so I blame all of them. So apologies. This is, I think, I'd have to go back and look, Max, but this may be the longest we've ever gone without a show. Like, it's been a long time. So apologies to everyone.
Yes, the
for
hiatus aside, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to it's a little quiet, but the illnesses made it go longer. Like, we were going to do last week potentially, and then some conflicts came up, and then we added like an extra 7-8 days in the gap here. So
You did. No, we did. Well, you lost your voice.
that was going to make it hard to record a
Yeah,
talking like
Can't
this.
do that.
Wouldn't make a very good show, would it? So yeah, it was a mess. So did want to say just apologies to everyone, especially because of our delightful patrons who support the show. And we always kind of want to feel like you're getting your dollar's worth. So
Yes.
your understanding there is greatly appreciated, and this is not the norm. So again, appreciate it. But as a way of making it up to all of you, we have a plan today. We are going to record 2 shows so we can put a couple out in quick succession this week. We thought, well, since there's sort of enough, I'm going to use the word current, and people can't see my air quotes, events. We sort of thought we'd do a current, I like going to keep saying that, events show, and then one that will separate with our previously promised deep dive on Billy Edwards and a little circle back on a challenge my partner Maxwell Brusky issued to me last show. So today, let's deal with news. And I think we have to get to the worst news first, Max.
Current events.
We're both wearing black. And I have, like one of those big, Queen of England hats with the black veil because we are in mourning. Badger football is over again.
Scrap it. D3.
It has died twice in 2 years now.
NAIA.
First it was Colin Hitchler, and now Max Stienecker has left the program. So football is over, right? It's the end.
I know they'll have to rise like a phoenix from the ashes.
In the NIA. I can't even say NAIA. I'm having a rough time with it. But in all seriousness, okay, so to touch on the news, maybe people haven't heard, Max Stienecker, noted recruiting ace guy.
General manager.
No, I thought that was Pat Lambert.
No.
Don't care. Whatever. One of them is director of player personnel, and one was GM, maybe, right? Like there was promotions in there.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever.
Forgive me, I don't know which is which. I don't know how much overlap or crossover between those two jobs there are, but they were always mentioned in the same sentence.
Correct. They were a team. And
a tandem.
From what I have seen, the understanding is Lambert was more on the skill position side, or whatever you want to use, the ball.
Ball carrying.
There you go. And Max was more focused on lines and tight ends. I've seen that mentioned. I've never actually heard that laid out. But I'll be honest, I haven't listened to a ton of their interviews. Just
no, I haven't either.
Because I'll be honest, it's not something that's massively engaged me. But here's what I'm going to say. I have been thinking a lot about like why this isn't a big deal to me. And it comes in multiple parts, right? And here's the thing that I would lead with. So remember when Saeed Khalif left and you and I were both like, this is going to be fine. This is no problem. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is going to be fine.
I do.
And I'm going
to a Big Ten rival.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this. I was wrong about that because after he left, like they had a recruiting issue, right? I mean, classes measurably fell off and Chris is like, yeah, the assistant coach is doing, and Chris didn't pick it up because, and you and I were wrong. Like we said that. We're like, this isn't going to be a big issue. The recruiting's not going to fall off, but it did. But now they're losing, when I call it roughly equivalent guy, again, the whole world of recruiting is changing and blah, 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 and portal, all those caveats out there. But very similar guy to Khalif, right? And maybe arguably better, right? Because he's going to USC versus Michigan State. Obviously, USC is willing to spend, get this guy, off he goes. He effectively, nominally, is taking a demotion, right?
Right. I was going to ask you what you make of that part of it.
It's something to do with the color green. He's getting paid.
Sure.
So good for him, but
no. My point is there's nothing to read into that he's taking a lower paying job or a lower title, if you will.
Again, I don't know what the difference between him and Lambert is right now. So it's funny because it's trying to understand, like, this is like a silo of the profession that sits next to sort of like the position coach silo of the profession, right? And it's like, how they get things like run game coordinator and assistant coordinator and, assistant head coach. And you're like, you don't know how much that means. We really don't.
Well, it's in your silos, right? You got your talent acquisition, talent development, talent deployment.
Exactly.
Like they're exclusively on the talent acquisition side of things.
Exactly. So to your point, I don't know how much the title means in terms of what their day-to-day role is. I mean, there's always a thing where you want a bigger title. I mean, every human being in every profession likes that, right? But my assumption is it's money. And I have been told,
mine too. Yeah.
And if the person who told me this is listening and wants me to give them credit, let me know. I'll do it because it's not any information that I had. But been told that these guys get paid around what you think a younger position coach gets paid. So probably in the 200, 250, 300 annual salary range. So
dude, that's good money, man.
It's great money. And especially if
that's really good money for
especially if you're 24 years old, like he is.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
And so again, to circle back to my original point, why am I not worried about this? When we saw with Saeed Khalif a huge drop off when he left, it's because of assumptions we made back then that I think were incorrect, an assumption I'm very comfortable making right now. And it's around this word of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think when Khalif left, with Paul Christ and the great mystery that's going to, be at the tail end of his career, that dude was clearly not interested in dealing with the changing landscape of college football. That's no secret. We assumed he would be reasonably engaged with that and find a person to replace that role. And even if he didn't, they'd take care of it in-house. Kind of looks like they didn't, right?
Right.
But now, fast forward to 2025, I don't have any issue thinking that Luke Fickell is probably sleeping an hour and a half a night trying to figure out how he's going to replace this guy. I mean, this is the dude that's yelling at people about snap counts after games.
I know.
There is an intensity and an urgency to him. Whether he's going to work out or not, we don't know. But I don't doubt for a second that there is an urgency and an intensity to his focus. And they will find somebody. I mean, they did poach a guy from Alabama last year. Don't ask me to remember his name, but was sort of slotted in under them. I will be very surprised if this sort of isn't planning for that in some way, shape, or form, like the ability to move up.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll see.
Here's kind of my thing on it. And I think a lot has changed in terms of the budgets and restrictions, what I mean, with the assistants, and the staff and stuff like that. I know we'll get into that with the changes on the Badgers staff too, but I'm not like, I don't know how much you can take from Saeed Khalif in comparison to this. Just because I feel like it's changed so much since then.
Definitely.
The ability, and not just the inclination, but the ability to spend the money on this sort of stuff. This is like standard stuff now. Back when they had Khalif, that was still kind of a new thing. To have somebody like that you actually knew about,
Yeah.
and that did more than hotels and dorms and meals and I don't know, going to Dottie Dumpling's dowry or something, or whatever you're gonna do with your host or something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like like the visit experiences. There's a little bit more than that, okay? And it's kind of to me, there's always people that they had looking at film. They just didn't might not have had a title, or it was like, film assistant, or, recruiting something. You know what I mean? It wasn't the same way. So I don't know, comparing this to that. Yeah. But here's my thing about this one, and how many of these guys do you think are like, a defensive backs coach that produces NFL talent and is eventually going to be a coordinator, is eventually going to be a head coach, like the 80-20 thing? You talk about, like, how much do you think that applies to this?
I think, why wouldn't it? Like,
Well, yeah, why wouldn't it? But nope, I agree with that. But what I'm getting at is like, how much of a difference is there between the 20s and the 80s, or the upper echelon of the 80s? I just, like, everybody liked Max Steinecker and everybody likes Pat Lambert, but I don't know, there's a lot of 22, 23-year-olds that can do that, I would think.
who are willing
right?
to work 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, what is the particular talent or the particular skill or the particular personality trait that you bring to that makes you excellent, or distinguishes you from your peers in that role? Is there? I don't know. I guess there is, like anything else, but I don't know. I just don't know that it's that hard to replace that kind of person. And by the same token, I could be totally off base, and I might be missing something. And I'm not trying to, poo poo Mr. Steineck, young Mr. Steinecker's
Right.
skills or talent, or what I mean. And I think the other thing on this one too is, I think everybody's acknowledged, we had a guest on to talk about it, that USC was behind the curve on a lot of this stuff. For whatever reason, it's USC. I don't know how they get behind. So I don't know if it's something where they threw money at a problem, they looked around, whether it's the Big Ten or elsewhere, and whether Steinecker's talent, or, whatever they thought, or whether Steinecker had an agent. Coaches have agents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they did, they targeted him, and, and they did the thing like you would with a Colin Hitchler, who did get fired after the season. You know what I mean? But like, they clearly targeted him. And I don't know if that, like, undercuts what I'm saying, but I mean, that's kind of where my brain's going. It's not, I don't freak out about it, but whether it's, I guess it's interesting conversation, but I just, unless I'm missing something, I just don't feel like I am.
No, well, a lot of this was basically poaching a lot of Fickle's old people, because they took Notre Dame guys. I forget the guy that used to work at Cincinnati who went with Freeman. So
right.
I'm assuming it's the first one, the one they got from Notre Dame, whose name is escaping me right now. I can't think of. Said, "Oh, this guy's great. Grab one of those two, right? Mm-hmm. Reach out to Lambert, reach out to Steinecker, and maybe you grab one of them." So I think it really works like assistant. Again, it's just a different silo in the profession, just like assistant coaches are. It's these are going to be networked. It's the front office of college football.
But having dedicated human resources, human capital for that silo of team development that's still a new thing.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's where it's, I do think you have to look at it the way losing a cornerbacks coach or a safeties coach is, like, oh yeah, maybe he's in that top 10%, maybe. But I have little doubt these days they're going to cycle in a new one. There's a 23-year-old working there who's been grinding,
Right.
Like, I mean, the story on Steinecker is interesting to me. I'm curious how much of it is just a function of his timing as this thing became more of a role versus, like, is this the norm? Like, he came in as a student, right? He was an undergrad assistant at Cincinnati for them.
Yeah.
He then sort of was like, the SID internee, but on the recruiting side. And then they gave him a job as soon as he graduated. So as soon as he finished college, like this is what he's been doing. So I am curious if they're doing, if that is a route into this, is as an intern doing this stuff. So they have, someone they promote within and then they backfill internally, or they're going to fill from outside. But again, I look at this now in the same way I look at losing a Dave Aranda. I mean, let's say he's Dave Aranda, right? He's the Dave Aranda of recruiting. Well, you need a guy who can find someone and replace him. I'm not saying like, well, now go find the Justin Wilcox. I'm just saying in general, like, yeah, maybe you lost a really good one, but you can backfill this and you have the infrastructure around it that I don't think this changes anything massively. And lastly, and this is the uncomfortable part, which the great thing about being a 2-year recruiting coordinator is one, you haven't really had to prove massive results in your evaluation yet.
That was where I was going to go next. Like assistant coaches, it's a little bit easier to measure.
Right. Like, we're still in these guys are like redshirt sophomores this year. And, freshmen have percolated up. Sure. And some transfers have percolated up. Sure.
Well,
but
let's talk about that recruiting class 2 years ago.
Well, I mean, I'm not even worried about that one. But
I know, but it's very hard. That's you really anticipated the point that I was going to make is like, how do you measure what the application of skills or success? Like it seems to be, it's hard to quantify,
right?
What, that skill set talent, like I was talking before, like there's at least with talent development and talent deployment, like, yeah, there's some numbers and there's like success that's a little bit more tangible than this.
Right.
I think.
Well, the only numbers you have, honestly, are recruiting rankings. And like the Christ COVID era classes are no different than these. I mean, they're in the same ballpark, right? I mean, they're top 25-ish classes. So
yes.
I again, it's more like not poo-pooing anything. Just everybody's got to chill on this one. It's going to be okay. I know the thing is, because his job is very online.
Yeah.
There is a parasociality to him. Like he is referred to as Pat and Max by the very online fan base. And so like there is a thing there and it makes people freak out because they just lost a friend. And
oh, totally. Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh, that's a great point.
There'll be a new
that's
friend.
Great point.
It's going to be Pat and something else. It's going to be like another morning show duo sounding thing. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Promise.
So we can put a bow on this by saying like, we don't need to worry about moving to FCS.
No.
We don't have to fold up the tents.
Maybe.
maybe one tent.
Yeah, maybe one. All right. So we'll get that one off the table. That was the big one. That was the most urgent one. I'm sure that's what's keeping everybody, up at night. But we're safe. Let's move to coaches because I guess it was, we originally planned on recording this last week.
Right.
We were fresh off sort of the new guys / promoted guys making their media debuts between, let's see, we got Jeff Grimes, talked to Jordan Reed, and who was the other one we got? Oh, the new safeties coach, who I can't think of, Jack Cooper, my nutmegger.
Yes, your nutmegger. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about these new hires. Did you, first off, I don't know, do you want to attack constructed? Let's just do what they said. Did you get anything interesting from what they've said, what has been done so far? Jeff Grimes has been doing a lot of media. I'm not sure if you're aware, but he likes fullbacks. I don't need to hear that anymore, but I know they like to say that. That's all I hear is fullbacks.
I think that's anything? Pretty cool a little bit. It's all right.
But we okay, they had a fullback. I go back to they had a fullback last year.
I know. But even still.
They had a fullback. Would you like me to tell you how many snaps Jackson Aker played last year?
I don't know. It's like having a good ice cream sundae or something.
So is it just that you like that it's called a fullback?
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay.
It tickles the cockles,
What if they just called him a tight end that lined up in the backfield? Would it be the same?
No, it's not as sexy.
Okay.
It's not.
Because
it's just not.
I saw the little clip of him on the camp that they put on social media this morning where he said, you'd like to be able to line up a tight end at fullback. Basically, he's saying no, you can line him up as a fullback, but people don't know just by personnel where he's going to be.
Yeah.
So if people want to call that fullback, I'm cool. If that makes people happier, great.
It makes me happy.
All right. I mean, you're the people that love this.
It's a guilty pleasure.
When he's like, I'm really, we are going to stress grit and toughness. And people are like, oh, Boy,
Thank God.
they solved it.
I'm not going.
Wait,
I'm
they're
not going
not?
there.
I mean, so
Yeah.
good because they weren't trying to be tough
Well,
before. They were trying to
when
be
I was
soft.
when I was that's funny that the grit and toughness thing came up though, because that's interesting because you think of the old grit factory thing, right? You remember like in the last
Yes.
year of Chris and when he like the Longo era on offense, like they didn't. It's not like they struck me as being like soft or anything like that. I
No.
mean, but at the same time, it's not something that you heard Longo ever emphasize or anything like that too. And I don't think that that's bad because I didn't think any of those guys were soft, and I don't think they played soft. But I don't know how much of that is just I don't want to pandering is the wrong word, but like some kind of like strategically placed buzzwords. Is that
Max,
better?
it's pandering. It's pandering. It's 100% pandering. So like all the old guys in their collared polos are like, oh, yes, yes, yes. This is like the ultimate old white guys at 8-foot tables booster event where he's sitting up front and Matt LaPlay's like, do you like teams that are tough like Barry Alvarez did in 1994? And they're like, oh yes, tell me more. That's all this is. This is because here's the funny thing. Like I've been thinking a lot about what he wanted from Jeff Grimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like why he hired Jeff Grimes. Because to Jesse Temple's credit, he has a good article in The Athletic, more or less about like, how is this different than Longo? And a lot of it is like toughness and grit and going. And then there's some of that stuff in the beginning that I kind of skim over. There's really, I mean, my favorite is this. It's Longo, according to the numbers that Jesse has, used shotgun on 98.4% of snaps at Wisconsin last year. Do you know how many Jeff Grimes used? Like what percentage of snaps? At Kansas last year?
85%.
97.5. It's 0.9% less.
Well, he did have Jalen Daniels though.
So let's pretend, like what is that? 700 snaps in a season, right? So what's 1%? That's seven snaps. Let's say it's 7 snaps. All right. So they're very gritty and tough in those shotguns. You should see how gritty those snaps are.
So you're saying he probably did it a lot on 4th down.
Yes. There is a difference, though, and that's where.
Okay.
So if you look at personnel usage, Longo, 62% of snaps were out of 11 personnel, and then second biggest grouping was 10 personnel. So 4 wide, empty set. Well, not empty set, but 1 back, 4 wide, right?
Yeah.
18%, and then 12 personnel, 13%. Grimes is same thing, majority 11 personnel, but that's everybody these days at 50%. But he used 12 personnel, so the 2 tight end sets 40% of the time. So it's like that's 90% of the offense right there is swapping a tight end and a slot guy. So it's different and it's going to look different because the formations are going to be different, but it's not massively different. And that's the funny part because then Fickell goes on to say, like, we're not going to ditch a lot of the passing concepts we got from Longo. We're going to keep a lot of those, but like we're going to be, what is the term now? An NFL style? They don't say pro style. It's NFL style.
I thought that was awesome.
Which just means a lot of shotgun and a lot of 11 personnel. So exactly what they've been doing, just not under center. Sorry. But I was thinking about like, well, what is Fickell after, right? Because like why, aside from the offense not working, like why did he do this? And I think it is less philosophical in a sense. Like it's not directly philosophical. Like I don't think he had an issue with the air raid per se.
Oh, I don't know. Not at all.
I think his issue was, and it's going to use the same term as before, it's urgency. I get the sense, like, again, going back to yelling at reporters about true freshman snap counts at the defensive line, like, he is like manic over why this doesn't work. And I get the sense, that, he'd go to Longo and be like, why isn't this offense working? And I was like, well, you just got to give it some time and it grows. And, every day we're getting a little bit better. He does that whole sort of thing he did.
That's a good invitation.
Thank you. Well, that's what a cold does.
That was really good.
You can get a little more guttural and do your Phil Longo. But So I think his problem was like, no. This guy, it has to get a lot better really fast, and you need to make some changes. And Phil's like, no, we're going to 7 running backs, and we're going to figure them out. And he's like, no. Trim it down. Get the best ones out there. We got to get better. And like the offensive line is a mess. We can't snap about, well, Jack's going to figure something out. No, Jack McNeil's gone. And I think what he's looking for is a guy that's going to be way more urgent about it. Mm-hmm. And I think to be urgent about it and be able to say like, no, you need to tweak this or no, you need to tweak that. I think he needs an offense that's just closer to what he knew. And I think it's like in times of crises, right? All these guys kind of like return to what they're comfortable and what they know. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But that very much feels like what Grimes is. Because like I feel like with Blazek, it's like, oh, I understand philosophically what this guy's going to do, blah, 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 blah. I trust this guy. He's urgent. He fixes things right away. Things change. He, 5 guys, boom, let's go. And it's done, right? And I feel like that's what he's kind of looking for with Grimes. Because Grimes has said they've never even spoken before this. Like they did not know.
Isn't that something?
The way he made it sound like never even crossed paths at a convention or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I do think it's fascinating that he did that. But that's about the only thing I've taken from the Grimes thing. Maybe we can get him to answer better questions over the post-spring. Somebody can get something out of him.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
But intrigues me.
I don't really have anything to add, and I think you're the point about the urgency thing makes a lot of sense too. It's a good way it's a good lens to which to look through it. I don't know trying to find the right word again, but it's a good analytical framework. Yeah, I like it. But this is very minor, but the one thing that stood out to me as I was listening to that is how much he sounded like. He didn't sound like necessarily like he's from Wisconsin, but it reminded me a lot of Chris in his tone. If Chris was like wound up and like talked like a normal person, you know what I mean? Like if he was like normally loquacious, not, media Paul Chris, like Paul Chris, probably if you had him off of a camera and probably sounded normally, but his tone was a lot like that. And there was something that was kind of more, I guess, normal, and I don't know if it's comforting or something like that, but he just comes off as a Midwestern kind of guy, and take that for what it's worth, which could be zilch, but there was something about the way that he was talking that kind of reminded me of the Chris thing. And I wrote about it. It's like we all grew up with guys that sounded like that. They were the gym coach or your T-ball coach or your football coach or whatever the case may be in Wisconsin, and he sounded like that.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, but it jumped out at me. So like I said, that's nothing substantive to offer necessarily. But I don't know. Overall, I you can't say anything until you see what happens, and it's just. People ask me, the casual fan, that knows I do this and stuff. Well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, schedule's tougher. I think they brought in some good transfers. They got a new offensive coordinator, but not how that, you don't know.
Right.
you don't know. I don't know. And I don't get the impression that I'm excited about it, but I don't know. Hope or cope. I don't know. I don't know. So take from that what you will.
So let's talk about the rest of them. I mean, I don't need to go deep dive on all their bios. You did an amazing deep dive on their bios, by the way.
I didn't do a deep dive. It's the Cliff Notes from the UW site.
I know, but you pulled them together. That's the W for me. Like, good job.
He's okay.
But I thought it was interesting. Here's the thing that I thought was interesting, and it was something that wasn't actually in your deep dive, but it's very much tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Cooper, 35. Jordan Reed, and these are estimations based on the year they graduated college, so maybe I'm a year or two off, but it doesn't change directionally what we're talking about. Jordan Reed is 31. Joe Ludwig, somewhere around 30. Again, we can talk about the Andy Ludwig erasure at some point, although they fixed that on the website, which is kind of funny.
Joe Ludwig played at Utah until 2021, so he's a lot younger than that.
Yeah, sorry, under 30. That's what I meant to say. Did I say 30? I meant under 30.
Yeah.
Scott Power is 45, and Blake Rowland is 45. And what I thought was interesting is I feel like the last two are kind of interesting because Scott Power was a defensive coordinator at Western Michigan, which is a big deal.
For quite a while.
And Blake Rowland was an OC at Southern Illinois for 5 years. OC for 5 years, Blake Rowland, but you said Western Michigan, but Scott Power was also defensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech and 3 years at Stephen F. Austin. Yeah, he's a DC.
Yeah.
One, the whole dynamic of what a G5 defensive coordinator is now in terms of the hierarchy of, it is the money thing. I mean, the money thing is crazy to see how this is like, we're just going to take defensive coordinators from Western Michigan. But what I thought was interesting about it is you have Jack Cooper, who's a young guy, right? And they're pairing him, young-ish, I should say, at 35. But I mean, newer to the profession. And they're pairing him with a much more senior guy under him to help out. And then Jordan Reed, same thing, who's 30-ish years old. You've got another guy who is an offensive coordinator, a longtime offensive coordinator, to just run the position for him. And I think it's to pair with him, I should say, not for him. That was the wrong word. And I do think it's interesting to have that dynamic going on. And I'm curious, for me, I was kind of curious, like Joe Ludwig is very young with Letton, right? So Letton is the senior there as the head guy. But I'm curious how much of this is the lead guy at the position there to be more of the recruiting face of it? Because Jordan Reed seems very, like, just in his availability, you're like, oh, that's more like that guy seems like someone who is like he's got that sort of charisma, right? Like,
he does. Yeah,
that
does.
kind of vibe
for sure.
that would resonate with high school kids because he's also not that old. So I am curious how much of the staff makeup is sort of aligned that way because it's so weird now to have I'm still getting my head wrapped around these massive staffs. And forgetting
that's another thing though. You didn't have the money to do that before. You weren't allowed to do that before. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Cooper, I'll go back to Cooper though for a second because he was a defensive coordinator too.
Yep,
just happened to be at Rhode Island.
Yeah, I mean it's not
which is Rhode Island's FCS, right?
Sure.
Okay,
I think so.
I think it is too.
I mean it's a step up for Southern Connecticut State where he went.
Yeah,
I mean that's D2.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
I should know these things, but I don't.
The Power and Roland ones are really interesting to me. And I don't know, how the coaching carousel or the coaching ladder or the career ladder necessarily works for everybody, but those guys are at a bigger program now. I mean, it's not that Western Michigan. I mean, or Louisiana Tech. That's okay. Those are it's G5. Stephen F. Austin, I think, is in the Sun Belt now, right?
They move every week, but yes.
But they weren't. They weren't when he was there.
I don't think so.
So I don't know. Those to me are a little bit interesting. And Cooper wasn't Cooper an assistant last? Yes. Yeah. So he was senior defensive analyst.
And he was a assistant defensive backs coach. Like he's a continuity promotion. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had so Power basically takes his slot.
Correct.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, judging by what they, what their the past numbers and things that they had, all of them are successful.
Well, I do think it's interesting that they are taking guys who had bigger jobs at smaller programs and had to do a degree of, that's much more managerial, right? And they're bringing him into a position group that's not as much of a managerial. Yeah. It's a little more focused. And I'm curious, I am curious to know what the philosophy is on that. Because it does intrigue me. And I have looked very briefly at a couple other schools with these secondary guys, and it's not as prevalent. I looked at Illinois and I think I looked at Iowa, and it wasn't as much where it's like,
interesting.
These secondary guys, like 2/3 of them, if not more, are former coordinators at lower levels. And what Fickle's thinking, what the philosophy is there, maybe it's a way to delegate.
Ludwig is a little bit different.
Yeah, he's a youngin'.
He's a young guy, but he came from Baylor.
Yeah.
So he's, he seems to me that's somebody who's already kind of on the rise quickest, maybe. And were you able to find out if he is any relation to?
Oh, he is. It's his son.
It is his son. Okay.
He's from he graduated Middleton High School.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's him.
That's not hey, it's not on the UW bio.
It is now. I honestly think somebody pointed it out. Now it's on. If you go on the website, it's under his bio. It says he graduated.
It wasn't on Monday.
No, I think it's recent. I agree with you because I made some kind of comment about it at some point to somebody. Like they don't even mention that his father is Andy Ludwig.
Oh, that's funny.
But it's on his bio now.
I feel like we're doing work.
I don't think it was us, but somebody thought. But
it wasn't there Monday. I know that for a fact.
I don't know.
Okay, so it is his son. Well, that explains a lot then.
Yes.
So
I mean, we're Nepo babying here, maybe, but maybe he's good.
hey, you know what? As long as you can walk the walk, I have absolutely, positively no issue at all
You got it.
with nepotism. So as long as you got the goods.
All right. Yeah. So the only other thing I don't even know if I need to say anything about Kenny Guyton, but it was only a one sentence thing that I felt bad we didn't mention when we talked about the offense.
Yeah.
In that Grimes and Guyton have been explicit about is that they are not taking a quarterback who does not have athleticism and mobility. Well, more the latter. They need mobility. Every quarterback has to move. That is like it's a non-starter. They both explicitly said that you have to be able to move. Bring me something there. So it's
Love
kind
it.
of a cheat. What's that?
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm glad that it's explicit, and yeah, it's got to be because no more.
I don't know what's his name, the freshman, the Florida guy who is Michigan.
Oh, Carter Smith. Yeah, he's got 2,600 rushing yards.
Yes. So I was going to say, so he fits that mold.
Yes.
And if he winds up being comparable to Jalen Daniels for the last 2 years, yeah, I'll take that.
Yes.
I'm good with that. I'm good with
that. So I don't have anything else to say about them. You want to just talk about the portal for a second? We don't have to go a long way. And my interest in it isn't as maybe granular as people think or player specific as people think.
As granular as people have come to expect.
Well, more like, I guess, like the way I would articulate it, and again, we're getting to older news. We're now to the oldest news.
Yeah.
So you can turn us off now if you want to, because you've already thought this through. But hang around. I have to say, as soon as the Xavier Lucas thing went from like Twitter lawyer saying weird things on the internet that I didn't really need to hear to like whatever you want to call it, like class action-y, precedent center. What is the, let's talk about the sanctity of contract law. Like as soon as it became like a bigger thing that the Big Ten stepped into, right? Because I got that sense as soon as Wisconsin said we're going to sue and the Big Ten puts a statement out right on the back of that, a minute later.
That's what we talked about. I mean, that's what I said. I'm like, they're not doing this unless they got a lot of institutional support behind them.
Right.
So,
exactly. But I mean, like as soon as that happened, my interest in it just went away. I'm like, I don't care. Whatever. This is just going to be like a bigger thing. And I am like turning the sound down on it. Like, let me know how it turns out.
I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a freaking lawyer and all, but like, I really don't. Outside of some, like I was very fascinated by the legal maneuverings. Like that I'm definitely fascinated by the move, counter move, and the negotiation, out of court negotiations that we were, privy to, mostly because of Xavier Lucas's lawyer. But I find that stuff fascinating.
Okay.
But it's more from a technical legal, because, I'm a geek in that area too. So I thought that stuff was pretty cool. But as far as the rest of it, yeah, I'm kind of with you. The one thing I do find fascinating that I think merits some further discussion is the fact that he's at Miami, he's enrolled, he's playing.
Yes.
So I'm like, what are we doing with the transfer portal at all? I think that's a little bit, that's kind of a little bit, it's not Einstein's special theory of relativity, but that's an attack on the paradigm, right?
Yeah, I don't really know what yes. Like let me put it this way. I don't follow college football because I'm a fan of contract law. Like that.
Right.
That's not why I do it. Like I'm kind of interested in like, oh, these guys get to play for 4 or 5 years and then they move on. And now they move around more.
And by the same token, your being a college football fan hasn't made you a fan of contract.
No, it has not. Actually, I might be less of a fan. But it was like, oh, okay. Whatever. So yeah, I'm done with it. Like whatever happens there, I just let me know at the end. That is my approach.
And like I said, that was really the most fascinating aspect of it for me, because it was kind of like, well, we're gonna do it anyway. All
right. Well, that's gonna be your job to follow and let us know when it's done, because I am changing the channel. The only other one I wanted to talk about was it happened yesterday, and we are recording Wednesday afternoon here, February. So National Signing Day. Yeah. Nizier Forkerine had his day in court, as they say. And I don't really, whatever's going to happen there is going to happen there. I guess my question is, do you want him back?
I guess so. I mean, I wouldn't object. I mean, he's
the best corner on the team.
He's a fine player.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one of those things where you kind of have to get used to that a little bit more, I think, because it's, the transfer portal with Lucas doing that. By the same token, it feels like what is the concept of eligibility anymore?
So his argument, I thought he was basically arguing that D2 doesn't count. I was simply,
It,
I'm gonna,
well, it's the same thing as the JUCO. It's saying it's putting that on the same level.
but not quite. That's not what his argument was. Based on the
I
article,
thought it was.
what he's basically arguing for is one season because he would have redshirted. He got injured one year and he had a family thing and he went home.
Sure.
And so he only played, I think it's in 2020. I should have the numbers. I think it was 2022. He played just some extra special team snaps that exhausted an eligibility year. And he would not have had he known he could have kept it. So he's appealing for one more year based on that. But why? But doing it through the courts, basically saying the NCAA is, again, that route.
It's gone.
But so, yeah, I'd be interested to me. I'm kind of mixed. Like, he is definitely the best corner. I mean, to me, he's better than Hallman just because he can tackle. But the flip side of it is like, what does it do? I'm now thinking this way, which you probably can't, but I'm like, what does that do with Harper and Agard down the line? Like, are we going to then see an exodus there next year? Because you need both of them to hang.
Who the hell knows?
So I'm kind of conflicted that way. Yes, best player to come back, but does it hurt long term? But the part of the whole thing that I found interesting was and this is just sort of like, leering at the car crash. He had to testify to NIL money. So under the threat of perjury, right, is the theory. So I feel like the past numbers, he told them he made $5,000 in 2023 in NIL money. And then this past season, he was paid $45,000 in NIL money. Okay, like that's kind of just getting an idea. But he did specify, he stated that in 2025, or testified that he thought he would make in the hundreds, plural, of thousands of dollars, which I found intriguing only because I just don't, this is all the stuff we don't know what we're dealing in.
I know.
And this gives you a little bit into it.
Yeah. So
it gives me more questions than answers, quite honestly.
The fact that was in a public forum and under oath, it's kind of like the Packers, because they're like a publicly owned. They're owned by the municipality and whatnot. They have to disclose their numbers on like any other NFL team, or like the exact opposite is like Northwestern, who doesn't have to disclose anything, but everybody else in the Big Ten does. So you're always doing this extrapolation or, whatever it is. Like in the NFL, it's a big deal because everybody pays attention to what the Packers numbers are and kind of goes off that because that's all they have. Like in the whole context of NIL, where everything right now is still opaque. How many other circumstances are like this where somebody has testified under oath in a public forum, unsealed for everyone to see what he got in NIL?
There's very little daylight, to your point.
Yeah, right. My hunch is that you made the point too, is like, you don't go to the NCAA, you go to court now. Like my hunch is there will be a lot more that will be happening.
The part that I'm puzzled by, right, is let's theoretically say he comes back, and I interpret hundreds of thousands to mean $200,000, right? What is making that NIL number quadruple? Like, is there a huge, like the questions I end up with are, is there a huge gap between, a guy who was viewed as maybe like a depth guy to a starter? Like, is that why there's the jump? Is it just the growth in the whole thing as it's, ramping up year to year? Like, these are all the things I'm just curious, because I feel like I almost have more questions than answers from the last number. And like, how much of that is a potential? If I go out and I have 17 interceptions and win the, Thorpe Award or whatever it's called. What's it called now? I always forget. It's the Thorpe Award, right?
Yeah. Thorpe Award.
Thank you.
It has been for a while.
Yeah. Well, I said now, which also means in the past, Max, I guess. But did not make that not true.
It's like 35 years old.
I think it's older than that.
It might be.
But I never can remember them. But I'm just very curious what that means. I mean, is the reality, like, if he has a reasonable Nizier Forkarine season, it's more like, high 5, low 6 figure? Like, what is the story there? So I end up with all those questions. But I do think that is interesting to talk about because it gives all of us who know nothing a little, like we can look through the keyhole.
Like one data point.
Yeah, like we can peer through the keyhole and get something.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Anyways, least interesting stuff to talk about, but there was something there. But I think with that, Max, are we done with our news and notes?
I think we are. No, I think we're good for episode 344.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap this
Yeah.
thing. And I just want you all to know, put a lot of pressure on Cody to edit this and put it up as soon as he can, because it's all his fault if it's too far apart. So don't get mad at us. Send an email to Cody. Or
Send an email to Cody.
Yes. I don't even, nobody knows his email, so that way he doesn't
I
get it.
was just going to say, we're not doxing him.
Yes, exactly. All right. On that note, bye-bye, everybody. See you soon on 345.
Yeah, until the next time, which will be a short time away.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.